As you start building more and more complex iPhone applications, you're going to find that your NSLog statements and breakpoints won't be enough. You're going to need to know more about how your application is actually working. And one of the ways to do this is with the application called Instruments, which is given to you as part of the iPhone SDK. You'll find it in the same place that you have Xcode and Interface Builder under the Developer Applications folder. And with this program Instruments, you can go much deeper into how your program is working. You can detect memory leaks. You can see how hard your program is working to check if you can make performance improvements. This application can tell you a lot about the inner workings of your program. Sometimes it tells you a bit more than you actually want to know. And because of that, Instruments contains a set of templates, almost like Xcode templates, but geared to the idea that you might be really interested in finding memory leaks one day and really interested in file activity on the next day. Now you can launch Instruments directly like I just did, and as you can see, it's not just an iPhone application. On the left-hand side, I can select between Mac OS X and iPhone and the iPhone simulator. I'm going to just choose an example one here. I'm going to select the activity monitor for Mac OS X and click Choose. What it's going to do is open Instruments and add the activity monitor instrument to the left-hand side. It has a collection of these different instruments or components that start to record different kind of data about how your application is working. Well, in this case, it's recording activity. Well, for what? Well, up here on the menu bar, I have a drop-down that's currently set to all processes. I could use that and attach to a specific process, but just to get a feel of Instruments, I'm going to hit the record button, and it's going to start running this timeline and measuring and tracing information about how the applications are actually working and what activity is happening on my desktop right now. I'm going to click stop here because I'm not really all that interested right now, but the idea is that Instruments will record a trace over a given period of time about how your application is working. Now you can make it do other things too, such as simulating tests and do some stress testing, but the idea is fairly sound that it's going to run over a period of time and record that information that you want. I'm going to quit out of it because even though I'd open it directly, that's not the way that I usually work with Instruments. What's a bit more common is that when you have a project in Xcode, that you run it from here when you're testing your application. So I have a fairly simple tab bar application here. There's really nothing except the default template and a few lines of code in my view did load. And these few lines of code are unfortunately very, very bad, which means what they're going to do is run a couple of loops that are allocating a whole bunch of strings, and those strings are never being released. So I'm probably going to get some kind of memory error. But let's say I didn't know that was going to be the case. I'm not sure why my application is acting a little sluggish. So instead of clicking build and go, I'll make sure that my application does actually compile and build has succeeded. And I'm going to click run, but instead of run and debug or run and just go, I'm going to say start with performance tool. And inside here, I've got instruments templates, and I'm going to select the one that says leaks. It's going to open up Instruments, and what it's going to do is with this particular template, it's actually going to attach two instruments to it, object alloc and leaks, and it's going to measure the object allocation. You can see that starting to kind of go up and up in time, and then every few seconds or so on the leaks bar, it's going to show that little spike because it's actually measuring and trying to detect, okay, there's unreleased memory here. There's objects now without active pointers to them, and those are starting to climb as well. And if I look at the lower part of the screen, this is the details of object allocation, which is telling me that there are lots of numbers going up and up and up. I can see my overall bytes are climbing, that it just seems to be spiking every now and then. Now what can happen is if I select the leaks option and select that second bar and just select it, it will actually give me more details. Well, as far as it's concerned, there's a lot of leaked objects that are NSCF strings, which is the internal representation of just our NS strings that we're using, and they're leaking 48 bytes at a time. This might give me a clue of where to look in my own application. But I can see object allocation just keeps going up and up and up. So I can definitely say that, yes, this was not what I expected. I was just hoping my program would run just fine by now. So I'm going to click stop, and say that, yep, I'm going to quit out of this because I really don't need any of that information. And back on my iPhone, I'm actually going to say, just because I'm worried about that application, I'm going to delete it from the iPhone itself. So I don't want it to run at all. And go back into my code. And let's say I had a suspicion at this point there was a problem with this code over here. So what I might do is say, I'm going to comment that out. Maybe there's something important here. Maybe this was a function call. Maybe I've got a clue about what might or might not be working, but I might be commenting out a few function calls or method calls or object creation, and then running it again to see what effect this is going to have on the instruments trace. So I've built this again, then I'll go back to my run menu, click Start with Performance Tool, and say Leaks again. And what it's going to do is, once more, open up Instruments. It's going to install and run that application on my iPhone. I'm going to click back into Instruments here, and I can see there is a spike in the object allocation, which is to be expected because it's allocating a whole bunch of stuff initially when the application loads. But as I'm scanning the information down on the lower section, those bytes don't seem to be climbing. There was an initial spike, and certainly the graph doesn't seem to be climbing up, and I'm not getting any spikes on my leak section. So that's a pretty good clue that what I just commented out is actually my problem. So this is a very simple, obviously, explanation of what you can do with it, but hopefully with this you get kind of a picture of what this application can do for you, allowing you to measure leaks, memory allocation, allowing you to scan what kind of objects are actually taking up the most memory, because it's going to show you the categories down here. What you'll often find is that you might see things like image objects are taking up a lot of space, and that will give you a clue. Perhaps I'm not releasing some of the images that I've got. So a very useful tool for detecting a lot of things in your application and ways of giving you hints about what to look at to make it more efficient and better for your users to use when you publish it to the application store.